You've been chasing an enemy for 9 straight days. 9 days of hard riding across open steppes. 9 days of watching them flee every time you get close. 9 days of growing confidence that the men ahead of you are cowards too afraid to stand and fight. You have 80,000 warriors at your back. You are unstoppable. And on the morning of the 9th day, May 31st, 1223, standing on the banks of the Kalka River, in what is now eastern Ukraine, victory feels so certain you can almost taste it. Then the enemy stops running. They turn around. And in that single moment, everything you thought you knew about this campaign turns to ash. This is the story of one of the most perfect military traps ever laid in human history. A story about how 20,000 Mongol cavalry annihilated an army 4 times their size in less than 24 hours. About how 12 princes died in ways so horrifying that chroniclers struggle to find words for it. And about how arrogance, division, and one catastrophically bad decision by one catastrophically proud man handed Subutai, arguably the greatest military mind who ever lived, exactly the victory he had been engineering for 9 days straight. To understand how 80,000 men walked into a trap this obvious, you need to go back, not just 9 days. Further, all the way back to the spring of 1220, when two of Genghis Khan's most brilliant generals, Jeeb and Subutai, launched what would become one of the most astonishing military campaigns in recorded history. The original mission was almost simple by Mongol standards. Shah Muhammad of the Khwarezmian Empire had made the catastrophic mistake of killing Genghis Khan's envoys, a move so cosmically stupid that it set in motion a campaign that would reshape the entire world. Jeeb and Subutai were sent to chase him down. What followed was a 3-year, 5,500-mile odyssey that swept from Uzbekistan through Persia, crossed the Caucasus Mountains in the dead of winter, shattered a Georgian army twice, killed their king, and pushed north onto the open steppes, hunting a group of Turkic nomads called the Cumans. The Cumans were tough people. They had dominated the steppes north of the Black Sea for generations. But when Jeeb and Subutai came for them, they ran. And when their Khan, Koshin, ran, he ran straight to his son-in-law, a powerful Rus prince named Mstislav the Bold of Galicia. Koshin's warning was direct and brutal. Today the Mongols take our land. Tomorrow they will take yours. It was convincing enough. The Rus princes gathered, argued, debated, and eventually agreed, better to fight the Mongols out on the steppe before they reached Rus territory. A preemptive strike. Simple enough in theory. What happened next was the first in a chain of catastrophic mistakes. Mstislav III of Kiev, one of the most powerful princes in Rus, the man who had started this whole war by deciding to personally execute every single Mongol envoy sent to negotiate, despite the fact that those envoys had explicitly stated they had no quarrel with Rus and were only chasing the Cumans, decided that killing the messengers was the right call. In the entire history of warfare, killing envoys has never ended well for anyone. This case would prove to be no exception. When word reached Jeeb and Subutai that their ambassadors were dead, they sent a second group with a message so short it needed almost no translation. You chose this war. And then Subutai made his first genius move. He left behind a rear guard of roughly 1,000 men, placed them at a river crossing, and waited. When Mstislav the Bold arrived and saw this small force, he crossed the river under fire, cut them down to the last man, and felt the warm glow of a decisive victory. His men cheered. His confidence soared. He didn't pause to wonder why 1,000 Mongols had stood their ground alone against a force many times their size. He didn't ask why they hadn't simply retreated like all the others. He felt what Subutai needed him to feel: powerful, dominant, and completely certain that the enemy ahead of him was weak. The 9-day pursuit that followed was not a retreat. It only looked like one. Subutai was doing something far more calculated. With every day that passed, the Rus and Cuman coalition stretched further across the steppe. The army that had assembled with 80,000 men began to exist less as a unified force and more as a loose collection of separate contingents, separated by miles, unable to communicate effectively, unable to coordinate their actions in any meaningful way. And with every passing day, those men marched harder, ate less, rested less, and moved further from their supply lines. Their horses were tired. Their soldiers were tired. Their commanders were growing impatient. Which, because Subutai wasn't running away, he was choosing his battlefield. He was choosing his moment. And on the morning of May 31st, after 9 days of carefully managed withdrawal, he had everything exactly where he wanted it. Mstislav the Bold made his final, fatal mistake that morning. Too impatient to wait for the other Rus princes to bring their forces forward, too hungry for personal glory to share the coming victory with anyone else, he ordered his own army and his Cuman allies across the Kalka River. The Mongols were right there. The moment felt perfect. But when the Cuman warriors reached the far bank and saw what was waiting for them, their faces went pale. Because the Cumans had fought the Mongols before, they knew what a feigned retreat looked like. And they knew that when the Mongols stopped running and turned around in full battle formation, like cavalry fanned wide to unleash arrows from every direction, heavy cavalry massed in the center ready to charge, it meant the trap had closed. The Cumans did the only thing that made sense to them in that moment. They turned and ran. And here is where the catastrophe truly begins. Because when they ran, they didn't run around the advancing Rus infantry. They ran straight through it. Thousands of panicking Cuman horsemen tore through the formations of Rus foot soldiers like a wave through paper, shattering their lines, creating gaps, spreading chaos and terror through men who didn't yet understand what was happening. And in that moment of maximum disorder, the Mongol heavy cavalry charged. Mstislav the Bold's army, the force that had been so confident, so certain of victory just hours before, collapsed in minutes, not in hours. Minutes. While this was happening, Prince Mstislav of Chernigov was still leading his men toward the battlefield. Unaware that the battle had already begun, he collided head-on with the flood of panicking Cumans streaming away from the front. And as his formation buckled under the chaos, the Mongols deployed one of their favorite psychological weapons, smoke bombs, thrown into the ranks to blind and disorient. Men who could not see could not fight. Men who could not fight could not hold a line. Mstislav of Chernigov and his 2 nephews died in the confusion, desperately trying to hold their soldiers together as everything collapsed around them. The infantry of Galicia, Volhynia, and Smolensk were encircled by Mongol cavalry who rode along their flanks and poured arrows into them at close range. Medieval European infantry were trained to stand in tight formations and resist cavalry charges. They were not trained to handle mobile horse archers attacking from multiple directions simultaneously. And they broke. They ran for the Kalka River, and the Mongols ran them down, slaughtering them in the water, at the banks, in the shallows. The chronicles say the river ran red, that you could not see water anymore, only blood. Mstislav the Bold escaped. He rode hard for the Dnieper River, and when he got there, He destroyed every boat he could find so the Mongols couldn't cross after him. A practical decision, also a monstrous one, because every man he left on the wrong side of that river, men who had followed him, who had crossed the Kalka because he ordered them to, were now abandoned to whatever fate the Mongols chose for them. And then there was Mstislav of Kiev, the most powerful prince, the man whose decision to kill the Mongol envoys had started this entire war. What did he do while the battle raged? Almost nothing. He had 2,000 elite armored troops and a strong position on a rocky hill overlooking the battle. He watched. He waited. He chose his own safety over his obligation to the men dying in the valley below. Historians have not been kind to this decision. They should not be. 2,000 elite soldiers committed at the right moment might have changed everything. Instead, he stood still and watched Rus die. The Mongols didn't even need to assault his hill. They simply surrounded it and waited. By the third day, Mstislav's food and water were gone. A man named Plaskinia, a Rus who had entered Mongol service, came forward with an offer. Surrender, and you will be released for ransom. No blood will be shed. He swore it on a cross. And Mstislav, exhausted, desperate, and out of options, believed him. The soldiers were killed immediately. The three princes, Mstislav of Kiev and his two sons-in-law, were kept alive for something the Mongols reserved for captured royalty. Royal blood, in Mongol tradition, could not be spilled on the ground, so they laid the three men down, bound their hands and feet, and placed great wooden planks across their bodies. Then Subutai and his generals climbed onto the platform and held their victory feast, eating, drinking, laughing, celebrating, while beneath them, over the course of 3 hours, the princes were slowly crushed to death. No blade, no blood, just the weight of the men they had underestimated, pressing down on their chests, breath by breath, until there was no breath left. 12 Rus princes died at Kalka. Nearly 9 out of every 10 soldiers who had crossed that river never came home. The flower of Rus warrior nobility was gone in a single day. The chronicles mourned in the only language they had left. We do not know where they came from, nor where they went, only that God sent them to punish us for our sins. But here is the part that should chill you most. Subutai didn't forget. He went east, reported to Genghis Khan, and spent the next 14 years building a network of spies across every Rus principality, mapping the terrain, studying the politics, cataloging every weakness and division that had made Kalka possible. And in the winter of 1237, he came back, not with 20,000 men, with 120,000, not to raid, to conquer. The Rus princes were still divided, still fighting each other, still incapable of the coordination that might have saved them. They had learned nothing from Kalka, and Kiev and Rus ceased to exist. 3,000 men could not have beaten 80,000 at Kalka through tactics alone. What made it possible, what made it almost effortless, was that the Rus defeated themselves. Their arrogance told them they were chasing a weaker enemy. Their division meant they could never act as one. Their refusal to heed warnings left them blind to a trap that, in hindsight, seems almost painfully obvious. Numbers mean nothing without coordination. One small victory at the wrong moment can be more dangerous than a defeat, because it makes you stop thinking. An internal division, more than any army, more than any general, is the most reliable way to destroy yourself without your enemy having to do very much at all. Subutai understood all of this. He always had. The 9-day retreat wasn't a retreat.